The room was full, the air thick with anticipation. Whenever Richard Feynman spoke, people expected brilliance packaged as clarity. They expected fireworks, complex mysteries, unraveled into elegant simplicity. He had a reputation for making the universe feel understandable, even friendly. So when a student raised a hand and asked a deep, almost metaphysical question about the foundations of reality, the audience leaned forward. They expected revelation. Instead, Feynman paused. No dramatic build-up, no clever metaphor, no dazzling analogy about spinning plates or wobbling jelly. Just a calm, direct sentence, "We don't know." There was no embarrassment in his voice, no hesitation, just honesty. That moment is more shocking than any complicated equation, because in a world that worships expertise, certainty feels like authority. When we turn to scientists, especially legendary ones, we want answers carved in stone. We want the final layer beneath the final layer. We want to believe that someone, somewhere, has already figured it out. Feynman refused to play that role. He could have speculated. He could have wrapped the unknown in poetic language or philosophical speculation. He could have offered a provisional story to satisfy the emotional need for closure. Instead, he chose intellectual integrity over applause. And that is unsettling, because we don't know does not feel like mastery. It feels like incompleteness. It feels like a crack in the foundation. It forces the audience to confront a reality far more disturbing than quantum paradoxes. Even the most brilliant minds stand before mysteries they cannot resolve. But look closer at that moment. The power was not in what he said. It was in what he refused to pretend. Feynman understood something most people avoid. The edge of knowledge is not a failure of intelligence. It is the frontier of discovery. To admit ignorance is to mark the boundary where exploration begins. Yet culturally, we treat uncertainty as weakness. We equate confidence with competence. We mistake smooth explanations for truth. That brief sentence disrupted the illusion. Because if Feynman could say, "We don't know," without shame, then perhaps certainty is not the highest form of understanding. Perhaps the real strength lies in clarity about what remains unresolved. The audience came for answers. What they received was something far more radical, a demonstration of intellectual humility. And in that quiet refusal to fabricate certainty, Feynman revealed a deeper truth, not about physics, but about knowledge itself. Human beings are deeply uncomfortable with uncertainty. It creates psychological tension, a kind of cognitive itch that demands resolution. When confronted with a mystery, the mind does not calmly wait for evidence. It reaches for closure. It wants an explanation, even if the explanation is fragile. This instinct is ancient. Long before science, cultures constructed myths to explain lightning, disease, and the motion of the stars. These stories were not foolish. They were stabilizing. They transformed chaos into narrative. They replaced frightening unknowns with intelligible agents and intentions. And that instinct has never disappeared. Even in the modern world, we gravitate toward voices that sound certain. The confident speaker feels authoritative. The clear, decisive answer feels trustworthy. Ambiguity, by contrast, feels like weakness. When someone says, "I'm not sure," we subconsciously lower our estimation of them. This creates a dangerous pressure, especially in public intellectual life. Scientists, philosophers, and commentators are often rewarded not for precision, but for confidence. A bold claim spreads faster than a careful one. A definitive conclusion feels more satisfying than a nuanced uncertainty. Popular science, in particular, sometimes smooths the rough edges of genuine doubt to present a cleaner story. Feynman resisted that pressure. He understood that certainty, when unsupported by evidence, is not strength, it is distortion. To speak beyond what experiments justify is to blur the boundary between knowledge and speculation. And once that boundary dissolves, science loses its integrity. Consider how often we ask ultimate questions. Why is there something rather than nothing? Why do the laws of physics have these particular values? Why does the universe exist at all? These are profound questions. But there are also questions where current physics has no final answer. The temptation is to fill the silence, to invent multiverse scenarios as definitive truths, to declare philosophical positions as scientific conclusions, to replace "we don't know" with elaborate frameworks that feel complete. But feeling complete is not the same as being correct. Feynman's refusal to speculate beyond evidence was not intellectual laziness. It was discipline. He drew a sharp line between what could be calculated, what could be tested, and what remained open. That line preserved the credibility of science. The illusion of certainty is comforting. It suggests that the universe is already decoded, that reality has been neatly packaged, that experts hold the final key. But the actual structure of knowledge is far more dynamic. It is a living process, constantly revised, constantly corrected. Certainty, when premature, freezes that process. Uncertainty, when acknowledged, keeps it alive. This is the tension Feynman exposed, not through dramatic confrontation, but through calm honesty. By saying, "We don't know," he disrupted the cultural expectation that intelligence must always produce a polished conclusion. And in doing so, he revealed something quietly radical. The most trustworthy answer is sometimes the one that admits its limits. At first glance, ignorance seems like the enemy of progress. If we do not know something, then we are incomplete, behind, unfinished. But science has never advanced by pretending the gaps are already filled. It advances by mapping those gaps precisely. Every major breakthrough began with confusion. Before Newton described gravity mathematically, no one knew why planets moved the way they did. Before quantum mechanics, no one could explain why atoms emitted specific spectral lines. Before relativity, the behavior of light defied classical expectations. Each of these revolutions started not with certainty, but with anomaly. An anomaly is simply a refined version of "we don't know." When experiments disagree with theory, when data refuses to fit expectation, science does not collapse. It sharpens its questions. It isolates the contradiction. It asks more carefully than before, what exactly is unknown? This is the hidden power of Feynman's honesty. By admitting ignorance, he protects the integrity of inquiry. He prevents false closure. He keeps the question alive. In quantum electrodynamics, the theory Feynman helped develop, calculations match experiments with astonishing precision. Yet even there, foundational questions remain. Why do the fundamental constants have the values they do? Why does the quantum vacuum fluctuate the way it does? Why does measurement produce definite outcomes? Physicists can describe the mathematics. They can predict results with extraordinary accuracy. But when pressed for ultimate explanation, the answer often returns to the frontier. We do not yet know. And that is not failure, it is direction. Because once ignorance is clearly defined, it becomes a target, it becomes measurable, it becomes investigable. The clarity of "we don't know" is sharper than vague speculation. It points to a specific boundary, a line where understanding ends and mystery begins. Dogma, by contrast, freezes inquiry. When a system claims final authority, it stops asking. It replaces exploration with preservation. Science thrives precisely because it refuses that finality. Feynman once emphasized the importance of doubt, not as skepticism for its own sake, but as openness. If you are certain you already have the final answer, you stop listening to evidence that contradicts you. You stop noticing anomalies. You stop progressing. Uncertainty keeps perception flexible. It also keeps curiosity alive. A solved universe would be static, predictable, closed. A partially understood universe is dynamic. It invites investigation. It encourages new tools, new experiments, new mathematics. The admission of ignorance is therefore not a retreat. It is an invitation. It says, here is the boundary, step forward. When Feynman said, "we don't know," he was not confessing defeat. He was defending the method that made modern physics possible. He was reminding his audience that progress depends not on confident storytelling, but on disciplined curiosity. In that sense, uncertainty is not the opposite of knowledge. It is the engine that generates it. For all the equations written, for all the particles discovered, for all the satellites orbiting Earth and telescopes peering into deep space, the foundations remain unsettled. We still do not know why the fundamental constants of nature have the values they do. The strength of gravity, the charge of the electron, the cosmological constant, slightly different numbers in stars would not form. Chemistry would collapse. Structure itself might be impossible. Physics can measure these constants with extraordinary precision. It cannot explain why they are what they are. We do not know what happened before the Big Bang, if that word even applies. General relativity describes the expansion of space-time from an early, hot, dense state. But as we approach the first fraction of a second, the equations break down. Quantum gravity, the theory that should unify the very large with the very small, remains incomplete. We do not fully understand dark matter. We infer its presence from gravitational effects in galaxies, yet its composition is unknown. We do not understand dark energy, the mysterious driver of cosmic acceleration. Together, these unseen components make up most of the universe's mass energy content. We can describe their influence. We cannot describe their nature. Even within quantum mechanics, the most precisely tested theory in history, there is no consensus on interpretation. The mathematics predicts outcomes flawlessly, but what actually happens during measurement? Does the wave function collapse? Do multiple branches emerge? Is probability fundamental or emergent? There is no experimentally decisive answer. And so, despite technological triumphs and computational power beyond anything in Feynman's era, the core mystery persists. We stand in a universe governed by laws we can calculate, yet grounded in mechanisms we do not fully comprehend. This contrast is striking. On one hand, we can land probes on distant worlds and manipulate individual atoms. On the other, we cannot answer why the laws themselves take their specific form. Progress has expanded our reach, but it has also exposed deeper layers of ignorance. The horizon keeps moving. Each solved problem reveals new questions beneath it. The more precisely we measure, the more finely we see the cracks. Physics is not a pyramid approaching completion. It is a coastline growing more detailed as resolution increases. Feynman understood that this is not a flaw in science. It is its structure. The honest answer remains, we do not yet know. And the weight of that phrase has not diminished with time. If anything, it has grown heavier, because we now understand how vast the unknown truly is. If the story ended with unanswered questions, it might feel incomplete. But that incompleteness is the point. Feynman's most honest answer, we don't know, is not a confession of weakness. It is a model of intellectual courage. It demonstrates a rare kind of strength, the willingness to stand at the edge of mystery without inventing comfort. Most belief systems promise closure. They offer final explanations, ultimate causes, permanent certainty. There is emotional security in that. It feels stable, it feels resolved, but it is fragile. Because if certainty rests on untested assumptions, it collapses under scrutiny. It depends on insulation from doubt. The moment evidence intrudes, the structure cracks. Curiosity, by contrast, is resilient. When you admit that knowledge is provisional, you expect revision. When you acknowledge uncertainty, you prepare for discovery. There is no humiliation in updating your understanding, because change was built into the process from the beginning. This is the deeper lesson in Feynman's refusal to pretend. He did not see the unknown as a void to be feared. He saw it as a landscape to be explored. The absence of final answers did not diminish his excitement about physics. It amplified it. Mystery was not an obstacle to wonder. It was its source. There is also something profoundly human about this stance. We live in a universe where the ultimate foundations remain unclear. We build technologies atop principles we only partially understand. We measure particles whose behavior challenges intuition. We map galaxies while still questioning the nature of space-time itself. And yet we continue. We ask better questions. We refine better tools. We approach the unknown not with despair, but with disciplined curiosity. The courage to say, we don't know, is the courage to keep going. It is the recognition that understanding is a journey, not a destination, that truth is not diminished by uncertainty. It is defined by the ongoing effort to reduce it. Feynman's honesty does not close the story. It opens it, and perhaps that is the most powerful answer of all.